Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we're back in War Thunder and we're looking at the Hornet Mk.III. This is a rank 4 battle rating 5.7 air defense fighter / strike fighter for the Great British nation. So, when the update was released, I thought the Hornet would be one of those things that kind of skips under the radar. One of those little hidden gems that nobody will really play because it's twin-engined and they don't have great experiences with the twin-engined, and I'd like to report that I think I'm correct. At 5.7, the Hornet is an absolute monster. There are many factors to this, and we'll go through this in this video. Now, just like the P51 video, I did this video at the point where I had all of the performance modifications unlocked, but none of the bombing and rocket ones. But understand that this can carry lots of secondary weapons, making it very useful in ground forces. But once again, I won't really be talking about that, but just understand it will be useful. So, stock, the Hornet Mk.III definitely has its issues. Even though it still has a ridiculous climb rate, what it struggles with is the fact that it can get taken apart by quite a lot of machines, especially the American bombers, which you will see a lot on Hokkaido. And also, the default belts on the Hispanos are not exactly great. The default belts give you heavy PT, making only half of your bullets useful, and only half of them being heavy. Now, what is interesting is I would actually forego some of the performance upgrades to start with, in order to get the offensive 20mm, with the good climb rate, and the fact that you get an air defense fighter spawn, which is generally 2,000 or 3,000 meters on, depending on which map you're on. It means that you can climb up to the bombers and take them out, which should be your priority target for the first few modifications that you unlock on the Hornet. You should first go for the offensive 20mm, then radiator or fuselage, depending on what you feel like, and then work on the new 20mm cannons. Air target belts is generally the one I get, but air targets, universal, ground targets, stealth, they are all decent belts. Just make sure that you get off those default belts so the majority of your rounds do something. Now, what is interesting about the Hornet Mk.III is there's been a bit of false advertising about it. In-game, it has 4 20mm Hispano Mark II cannons. Now, if you go to the dev blog, it actually says that it should have 4 Mark V Hispano cannons. Now, there is a big difference between the Mark II and the Mark V. The Mark Vs you will find on machines such as the Tempest Mark V, the Tempest Mark II, a lot of the rank 4 Spitfires, and when you look for the Mark II Hispanos, they are the ones that you will find on stuff like the Mark V Trop and the Mark V C. So, the Hornet, being a 1946 aircraft, should have Mark V Hispanos on it, but for some reason at this moment in time, it doesn't. Now, I think this may be a bug, and if it has been reported, great. I will put in my own bug report, because it does actually change how you play this machine a lot. I would also like to thank Steady Spring, which is one of my subscribers, and hangs out on the Discord if you ever want to see him, for pointing this out to me. So, with that said, with the 4 Mark II Hispanos right now in the game, what you get is 4 guns which throw out a lot of burst mass in about 2 seconds, but then they'll jam instantly. Now, weapon maintenance in my crew right now is, on the Hornet crew, if we just look real quickly, is 3.5 out of 5. Now, this gives you about a 2-second, maybe 2.5 or 3-second mass of shots that you can make until your guns start jamming themselves. Now, you may think this isn't too bad, especially if you have the offensive 20mm belts. Therefore, you can change to air targets, you can change to the heavy sap or sappy rounds, and you can do a lot of damage. Well, the issue with the Mark II Hispanos is they have a great problem with dealing with armor. And that's basically because of the sappy belts, which in my opinion is one of the best. It only penetrates 6mm, so against stuff like B-17s and B-29s, which are going to be your main fish in the sea to catch, you're going to have issues killing them because you can't get through the armor. Same with the DO-217s. This may mean that you decide to go after or to use different belts in dealing with those, machines. You also get 600 rounds of ammunition, 150 per gun, which is completely enough, but once again, just make sure that you don't jam your guns, because that will happen often. It's such a big issue that if you guess the new 20mm cannon upgrade, it actually gives you plus 40% to mean time between failures, which is absolutely staggering. It's nearly as bad as the F1B, which is around 60, 62, something like that, which is probably one of the highest in games. So yeah, what you're getting out of these guns is very much you need to burst fire them first of all before you get the modifications, and even after the modifications you cannot use them for an elongated time. You will jam your guns, and also try and get your weapon maintenance as high as possible. But as I said before, I think this is one of the first planes. Maybe you can make an argument for the F-82, but at least for the British, this is the first plane which actually fits the air defense fighter role, which basically means that it has the 2,000 to 3,000 meter spawn. It is really good at defending bombers, it is really good at attacking bombers, and once you start getting those rank 3 and 4 upgrades, it becomes what the release Tigercat was. Now, if you don't remember what the release Tigercat was, there was a few unfortunate maps for the German teams back then. There was, I believe it was Raw, where the Tigercats would actually get a spawn of around 3,000 to 4,000. You could go over to the enemy airfield in about 2 minutes and be above them and just dive on them. Now, if you had a squad of 4 or 3 of them, you could massacre a German team within about 5 minutes. The same thing is exactly the same with the Horton. So, if you have 4 Hortons and you toddle over to the Germans climbing, you can get across maps like Hokkaido in about 3 minutes, which is nowhere near enough even for P-51Hs, which are a whole BR above this thing, remember, to be able to get up to your altitude. You can climb at 15 degrees in this thing, get to 6,000 way before the bombers even get to the bases on your side, meaning that you can actually set up an attack on the bombers, which actually makes sense instead of coming at them from the bottom. This thing can destroy bombers, it can protect bombers, and it can go after fighters. Now, generally against fighters, one of the biggest issues the Tigercat used to have is after that initial go at the fighters, you would have that initial run, which would mean that, you can kill the fighter, but after that you would struggle to get guns on target. That is basically the same as the Hornets. You've got to treat it as, right, I need to set up 3 targets in my vicinity. I go for the first one, and then ignore him after I've done that, understand that I'm going to be faster than him, he can't get on my tail, go for the next one, zoom out, get into a position to turn around, attack them in that, in that way again. You cannot engage fighters in a turn fight unless you have hurt them significantly. And just understand, because you are spawning at a very high altitude, and this thing can also go 750 when it's fully upgraded, that you're going to get to the enemy team before a lot of your team is. So you're going to be isolated, and you need to play like that, pretty much like how you would a P-47N or the old Tigercat. It's a monster at 5.7, which is just wonderful. But then again, it does have a tough stock grind, as I said. Another nice thing about it is that it can dive up to 810 kilometers an hour, then it kind of starts falling apart, but that is good enough to get away from the majority of fighters. And the straight line speed on this thing, 750, generally you can just stick at around 600 in a straight line at most altitudes, which is just completely bonkers when you think about the machines that you're fighting. Focke-Wulf D13s may be on an even playing field, but you still have the edge. The K4's not going to touch you, the D9's not going to touch you. It's all lovely stuff, and being at 5.7, generally you're not going to get into jet matches. The only thing you're going to see is the Me-262A1A, the Polka-Stora, or the first Arado. You may also see some of the Russian jets, if anybody ever flies them, and you will absolutely annihilate them. It's kind of interesting, to say the least. The only real disadvantage of the Hornets is not actually the Hornets' fault. There has been many matches while I've actually been playing this thing. I actually recorded it yesterday and today, just the matches themselves. I won 3 games out of 17. 3 games out of 20. So 17 losses out of 20. And I was looking at my KD, and my KD at this moment in time in the Horton, over 31 games, is 40 kills and 27 deaths. So we're looking at about 1.5 KD. And that is including the first 10 matches, which, you know, you're always going to struggle in. So it's not as if I wasn't doing that well in it, but unfortunately, because of the nature of this aircraft, if you're playing solo, you can't really carry a team. You can get 3 kills, but the quality of those kills may not be great. You're in a position to kill bombers at the start of the match. So let's say you kill 2 bombers, and then from that position you either get a fighter, or you either get an attacker. Generally what happens is you'll be able to get an attacker, and then maybe you've run out of ammo, so you have to go back to base. But engaging fighters is one of the hardest things to do in the Hornet unless you have all of the upgrades. Once you have all of the upgrades, it is definitely something you can do, but you can't turn with them, so just understand that. So when it comes to priority targets, the Hornet may not be the machine which is able to carry a game, but it's going to take win conditions away from the enemy. It's going to take the fact that they can bomb out the base or bomb out the airfield. It's going to take away those attackers, which can sometimes knock out a bunch of tanks. But it's not going to be able, on a one-on-one fight-to-fight, be able to do a lot. You need support there in order to be able to be useful. You need a guy who is going to be able to stick with you while you are running away from someone to try and set up a kill on him. Unfortunately, the Hornet in itself cannot do this like a Spitfire Mk.//or even a Tempest would be able to. You just kind of have to run and hope for the best. It is powered by 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines with 1310 horsepower between them, meaning that at a fully upgraded, you're looking at 25 meters per second rate of climb, which is basically the same as the Griffin Spitz and the P51H. Apart from this, is a whole BR lower. Turn time, definitely struggle with. Sometimes it's very hard to get guns on target, but they are centrally mounted, so that at least makes it a little easier, so you don't really have to worry about convergence. One of the other issues with it is the fact that its minimum fuel load when you're fully upgraded is 41 minutes, which is a hell of a lot. It means that your dive is good, but a lot of the times if you're going after bombers, well, you don't really need the dive. What you need is to be able to turn and dodge the shots that they're firing at you while you're trying to take out stuff. And because a lot of the fuel is centrally mounted, it means that you can, it feels like you have a really heavy fuselage, so lugging the plane in a roll can be a real issue. When you are stock, the minimum fuel is 45 minutes, so therefore you're even more sluggish, which kind of is annoying. I wish I could take like 20 minutes in this thing and see what it actually would be able to do. The combat flaps are not great, to be honest. They break off just over 300 kilometers an hour. A lot of the time what I'll use them for is that initial burst of turn, even if they rip off. I think they're still useful in that and can get you on target, especially against stuff like TAR 152Hs, which definitely will help out. But overall, I've had a hell of a lot of fun in this thing. And I haven't seen anybody really talk about it. I've seen through the polls that I've run on the channel, people are interested in it, but I haven't seen many people talking about it. A lot of people have been talking about the P51H and the rank 6 things, but the Hornet is a monster at 5.7. When I saw it at 5.7 in the tree, I knew it was going to be good, just from the base stats of the damn thing. And it's also in a position where it's gonna get up BR'd. It has to. This thing can easily fight at 6.7, because it's always going to be above stuff like P51Hs. I would even argue it's going to be pretty decent against jets, just because it has that head-on capability. Not as good as the Tigercat, because the Hornet does struggle in the armor department with only 38mm for the pilot, and also I would say the roll rate is better on the Tigercat, so the Tigercat will always be a slightly higher BR than the Hornet, but I still think the Hornet can get up there. The Tigercat at this moment in time is, let's see, it is 6.0, right? And it is nearly 100 kilometers an hour slower than the Hornet, and it has more firepower, and the secondary armaments are negligible. The Hornet has a better rate of climb. Turn time, I would actually give it to the Tigercat in this case, but it's just completely crazy how this is at 5.7, and the Tigercat, which I would argue is maybe slightly better in certain situations, but I think the Hornet is better in much more useful situations, which you'll see quite a lot. But it sits itself at 5.7, it's very, very odd. The only thing this is going to struggle with is turning, and you should never turn in it anyway. You should really use it as a boom and zoom aircraft, that is it. And if you ever try and use it in a different way, well, you're just gonna get shat on, just like you would in any twin-engine fighter. It is just a monster. It is a great example of the British actually, in the aircraft department, when it came to late war and even post-war 46 and 47, they really had their heads screwed on when it came to it, and definitely makes up for the ridiculous tank design of World War II. But yeah, keep your pilots safe, use your speed as an advantage, you can outrun everything, and understand that your Hispanos, they're going to overheat incredibly quickly, so you've got to make sure to learn how to burst, at least before you get that modification. There is no way this doesn't get up BR'd. This is either going to 6.0 or 6.3. I can guarantee that, and if it doesn't, go fly it all day, every day. You will batter everything in it, especially if you're in a squad. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.